This is episode 411 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, we've had a primary election since the last time we chatted, last Tuesday night. I don't think it was a surprise to either of us, although we didn't take bets, but I think we had our money on Mark Ronchetti winning.
But some pretty reliable pollsters had him way ahead, so that's not a surprise. So
he did with well over 50% of the vote in that five-person, really four major candidate primary for Republican governor. Then we had a few other races of note. On the Democrat side, Raul Torres won, Attorney General on the Democrat side. So he will be the odds-on favorite to win that particular race statewide. Michelle Garcia Holmes won pretty handily against Luis Sanchez. That was close to 60-40.
And I didn't know about that one, to be honest. I was like, I wasn't surprised she won in any way, but that's one that when the results came in, I was like, okay, who won that race? So
she has won or run before, not won before, but she has run, and she probably had some higher name ID as a result of that, especially here in the Bernalillo County area, the high population part of CD1, although CD1 has changed, and presumably we'll see Michelle Garcia Holmes running a tighter race this time around against her opponent, Melanie Stansberry. We had a few interesting legislative races. One of the most interesting was John Block. He has been a guest on this show. He ran down in Alamogordo, took out an incumbent Republican. So that was a bit of a surprise. 51 to 49 there. So really, really tight race for the New Mexico legislative district that Yvette Harrell used to have in that Alamogordo area. Of course, with some minor changes considering the redistricting. And Bob Godshall beat former Senate candidate Elisa Martinez in the Northeast Heights. Greg Cunningham beat out Adelia Stith on the west side. None of these are incredibly shocking, although John Block's race was by far the closest of the group and really one of the closer real races across the entire state of New Mexico. These primary races with relatively low turnout, we did unfortunately have low turnout in these primaries. They are pretty volatile in their, the way voters do turn out. So any additional thoughts that you had on some of these races?
Well, and Paul, I am far from an expert on the politics of these Democratic representatives for the state of New Mexico, but there was the idea that had been reported is there were some more moderate Democrats running against some more progressive Democrats, and it seemed like there weren't maybe as many breakthroughs as some people were anticipating, and just from the looks of things that odds are if you're a Democrat in New Mexico, you're tending towards the more progressive stripe. So I'm not sure that that's going to necessarily turn around without a big swing in the Republicans winning seats. So,
and I think AG is the most interesting race, not just for the Democratic primary, but also for the general, because AG really does affect everybody. New Mexico constantly under Hector Balderas signs on to these
class action lawsuits to outlaw oil and gas or whatever we're going to do. So,
and of course, the primary job of AG is law enforcement. I'm not well enough versed to say whether he's done a good job, but it certainly seems that the law enforcement situation here in the Albuquerque metro leaves a lot to be desired. So just as a quick aside, John Block had 1,540 votes. Rachel Black, the incumbent, had 1,494. Very, very close race there. So that's where we'll leave.
Oh, and just one quick point.
Ahead.
This was the election where you could go in, and if you were an independent, you could become an instantaneous Republican or Democrat. And not that many people did that, but then again, turnout was very low, period. And so, so it's one of those, this is an option we have, but I'm not sure that was likely in this race, in any of these primaries to make
I
any
talked to a
difference.
few folks who I'm friends with, essentially, and mentioned the process, the opportunity for them to do that. Because, DTS is a very big part of the electoral makeup of New Mexico. And I think a lot of them just said, oh, it's too much of a pain and a hassle. And I don't really, I don't get it. I think a lot of people like to do DTS just because it makes them feel like they're not part of one of the two major, machines or something. They don't, if they put the R by their name, then they are somehow personally responsible for Donald Trump. If they put a D by their name, they're responsible for Joe Biden. Those things don't really matter. It's how you vote in the general election that ultimately makes the big difference. I could certainly see people registering and voting either way in some of these primary races for various reasons. But that's the system we have in place, and it's all flawed. Nothing about it is perfect or any resemblance of perfect, because we're ultimately electing a bunch of people to theoretically represent not just us. I mean, it would be bad enough, Wally, if you and I sat around and we had to elect some kind of representative of us to go off to Washington. I mean, maybe your wife Carol could handle the job. Maybe my wife Krista could handle the job. But heaven forbid, you got hundreds of thousands of people registering and voting and different interests and
who are all over the place in terms of their positions.
Exactly.
And once you get into the law of large numbers, some of whom are crazy, so they couldn't tell you what their position is, but they're not happy with what you're doing. So.
Exactly. All right. Well, I was last week, most of the week, in Florida, in the Jacksonville area. Spent some time with Grover Norquist, a prominent taxpayer advocate, voice for limited government and taxpayer issues. Just, meeting to talk about what's going on in the country. Obviously, this is a conservative type group, and so there's a lot of people who are very expectant that this is going to be a epic election for Republicans, and I think there's very few things that really there's no reason for me to throw water on that concept. Joe Biden is not on the ticket, but all of the trends in the polls, the economy, inflation, fuel prices, there is nothing going on that Joe Biden can say, we're doing a really great job on this, and you can point to X, Y, and Z that I did. So I'll just say that from a national perspective, there's a lot of optimism, and there's efforts underway in a few states, Missouri, Mississippi. We talked about New Mexico's personal income tax, and there are states that are making tangible efforts, including those two, to really pull back, if not fully repeal. They're not at that level yet. Arizona's another one, but there are a lot of states really trying to become number 10 of the 50 to not have a personal income tax. So that's one of the big themes that was discussed at this meeting.
Yeah, and I'm not sure of any of these details. Paul is the first time learning about the details, but the two biggies that I know about, Florida and Texas, that don't have an income tax, and then the third that I'm aware of is Washington State. All three of those states have done pretty well economically. So, and very different, by the way. So, Florida, Texas, and Washington, you couldn't have probably three more different states than those. And New Mexico, guess what? We have the money to do this right now.
Absolutely.
If we wanted to, it's in the bank. People, we've got a 60-day session coming up. Maybe this is the year here in New Mexico.
And it just keeps coming in. And I think that's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
There are definitely some dark economic clouds on the horizon. But on the other hand, prices of crude oil and even natural gas are going to hit a critical mass where they are the cause of the recession, or at least partially the cause. They've risen to a point where there's something called demand destruction going on. And right now, kind of broadly speaking, in the U.S. economy, we have a lot of people getting out and about, traveling, going on family vacations this summer, and they do have assets, money that often they've stored up from the pandemic and from those stimulus checks. We in New Mexico, my wife and I received our $500 rebate, if you will, from the state of New Mexico. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that helps out, but, getting these one-time-ish benefits, certainly the federal stimulus, I hope to heck we don't get any more of that, because they're trillions of dollars in debt. The state of New Mexico has the money to do it, but getting those checks does not make you feel automatically better about the overall economic situation, unless you're literally living hand to mouth, which is a very precarious place to be in at this point. $500, you see that, but then you see an extra $20, $25, $30 to fill up your gas tank, an extra $50 or $100 every time you go to the grocery store. That $500 doesn't do much to alleviate your overall economic concerns. I think there's a lot of people really concerned about the economy at this point.
Yeah. You'd have to figure that even for the most humble of households, in terms of not having really high food or gasoline purchases, that $500 is 2 or 3 months at the most. And those are not the only things that have inflation associated with them, as I think we're going to talk a little later in the podcast.
Oh, and rent for people. One of the things about owning your own home and paying a mortgage is that there's an element of a hedge against inflation, because when you start paying on a 30-year mortgage, you're paying at the full price of that dollar. But then, after 15 years or so, you're paying a dollar that, in the case of where we are now, has been devalued rather significantly. So it's a much different equation right there for people who own a house. More, the bank owns the house, they're paying mortgage on it, versus somebody who's paying rent. And nationwide, apparently the average rent is now over $2,000. And I can vouch for family members that rent has gone quite high recently. The elections in New Mexico, of course, we just dealt with them. But judicial elections have been a point of concern for Rio Grande Foundation, for anybody concerned about crime issues, because I really think that electing more conservative judges, more people who follow the law and are willing to come down hard on criminals, is one of the core ways that we can address the crime problem in our state. And this article appeared back at the end of May. Voter-owned elections keep New Mexico courts fair, independent, by Jessica Molzen of the Common Cause New Mexico, which is an organization that's very much on the left. We disagree with them. This is from the Albuquerque Journal, and I did a little write-up on this because, it's one thing to say, oh, it's good that we don't have a traditional judicial system where you run as a candidate, and you say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then you get donations to the cause to hopefully put you over the top. New Mexico,
either from law-abiding citizens or criminals and their associates, is the kind of how it works out.
We just have this very convoluted, sometimes nonpartisan system that it's tough to figure out who is doing the right thing, and it's not reported, it's not covered. So you come to election day, and for the few weeks of early voting, I frequently get phone calls from people saying, who are these judges? Can you help me with information? And I've got to think, and unfortunately, I
Sometimes
often don't.
you
I don't
can.
have good information. So it's not that I have a crystal ball or a ready-made policy proposal here. However, I will say that defending the current judicial election system in New Mexico takes a certain amount of head in the sand mentality, because they've got to know that the system is not working as it currently stands. Yes, there are other aspects, including the city of Albuquerque, the mayor and the police, and the way that the Department of Justice, they're working through that. But this judicial system is not a particularly good system. And I think that's regardless of the bail reform, whether you have traditional bail or this on their own recognizance. I actually do think having good judges in place is more important if you abolish the bail system. And clearly there are flaws in that. And there's bipartisan talk of addressing that. So anyway, I'm not here with a ready-made policy proposal as I typically am, but just to say, wow, really, this judicial election system is a mess.
Yeah, and I think, Paul, I hesitate to say this, but man, I usually do my homework pretty extensively, but that's a tough one. And so
on the ballot,
on the ballot, and so when you're voting for judges, you're like, I wonder if this name sounds better. You know what I mean? It's
right.
like Judith. That sounds like a tough name.
Oh, yeah.
I'll vote for her. Yeah. You know, that is, I'm not sure that's the best system. And Paul, I hope I'm the minority in that particular one, but I've talked to a lot of people. It's like, who did you vote for the judges? I get everything from always the first one, always the last one, first, last. Just, it seems like it's almost random based on some sort of maybe consumer economics. So the friendliest name wins, or something that doesn't seem.
Well, I want the unfriendliest name.
Well, or the unfriendliest. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and then you get the retention election, and I just tell people, are you happy with the judicial system? Well, I always vote no on retention because you probably are going to catch some pretty bad judges, but you may catch some good ones in that. I would much prefer to have a traditional campaign for judge where you can have one judge saying, I'm going to lock him up and throw away the key, and the other one saying, I'm going to be lenient, easy to please judge. And then we can have those people duke it out in an election. And if voters continue to go for the easy judges, well, then they certainly have no reason to blame anyone but themselves. And it is a frustrating situation when even people like us, highly civically engaged, read the paper, listen to the news, etc., don't really know what is going on and what to tell people on these issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of kind of crime problems and where the city of Albuquerque may not do well, and again, this is not the judicial system directly, although there are allegedly judicial-related issues that play into the homeless crisis in our city. But the city council went ahead and passed the safe spaces ordinance to allow that to happen. It's a zoning change essentially to the development, the IDO is what they call it. So zoning. These are relatively highly secure because there was a talk about much more along the lines of, and I can't believe Brooke Bassan, city councilor, used this term, but she basically likened her model to Coronado Park, which is a human disaster area. Excuse me, but Safe Spaces is a little higher end. It's tense, but it has working restrooms, security, places for the homeless people to store their stuff. We will see how much this is utilized. There are facilities in Las Cruces. There's one facility in Denver, more than one. So hopefully it has an impact. But of course, it's been our take. And Pete Dinelli, very progressive guy, former mayoral candidate in the city of Albuquerque, who really called the mayor and APD chief Harold Medina on the carpet for not attacking the homeless encampments, the lawless homeless encampments around our city. He specifically talks about sidewalks and parks, but you name it, basically any physical location in our city has homeless residing there. It's just a matter of finding them. And I work downtown, and I can assure you, you name it, there's basically homeless people hanging out, or homeless people. So it was welcome from Dinelli to see that this isn't just a Republican conservative issue. Alas, City Council not requiring any specific enforcement mechanisms from the mayor, just providing safe spaces. And we'll see if this works at all. I suspect it's just going to act as a further magnet for more homeless to come here.
Yeah, this, Paul, is a very difficult issue. And the current model of using the city parks, it's all of the dirtiness of Woodstock without concerts, to keep you there. And, I don't know what the answer is. And the key about, we had the tiny houses, which the homeless won't live in because you have to be off of alcohol and be able to follow a few rules. So we'll see what happens with these. If you put too many rules, these homeless people can't live there. And I live in a part of town where on the way to find places, going down Zuni, going down Central. The other thing I'm seeing is a lot of RVs and campers parked either on Central or a street off of Central. And that was, I first started noticing that. Now I'm starting to see broken down campers that have wheels missing and things. So it's like, first of all, I'm not sure exactly how they got there, but they are there and they're not going anywhere until somebody takes some action to move them away. So yes, we have got a mighty big problem here in Albuquerque for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things that Dinelli rightly points out in this June 5th op-ed in the Albuquerque Journal is that the city is giving the homeless 72 hours notice to vacate. Well, that's not the way any of this works. That is just dumb on all levels. You have to take people who are breaking the law at that moment and physically have them moved. And it doesn't matter if you have to redirect resources. You have to physically have them moved at that moment. You can't give them 72 hours, 3 days, in order to then come back. And, presumably you're going to be back in 72, but it could be, a week. It could be 3 weeks. So anyway, I am glad to see some bipartisanship, at least among some. But again, there's talking about the issue and actually doing something about the issue. And this mayor clearly is not doing anything. City Council, I don't think they have the backbone to force the mayor to do anything. Really, it's all about the judges at this point in time. And will we elect judges this November who are going to enable or encourage the kinds of policies needed to address both crime and homelessness, which are interrelated but not necessarily the exact same issue.
Well, and it'd be interesting, Paul, to see how do these new safe spaces actually work? Where are they? Do the homeless go there or not? And if they do, what is the reaction of the people living in the neighborhoods? Because, quite frankly, many, I won't say all, but many of the neighborhoods where the homeless are right now, there's generally a little bit of a buffer. They tend to be more in light commercial or commercial areas and a little buffer away from neighborhoods. So we'll see what happens. But that is ironic to cite the Coronado Park as an example of anything other than bad.
Right. So now we're on to some of the red meat issues that I know we've talked about a lot, but they keep getting worse, so we have to keep talking about them. ABC News has a story that the price of regular grade gasoline spiked 39 cents over the past 3 weeks to $5.10 per gallon. That is $1.97 higher than it was 1 year ago. which was still in the Biden administration, just the earlier days of the Biden administration. And then on inflation hit a 4-decade high of 8.6%. These are interrelated items because energy, of course, filters throughout the entire economy. And the fact that energy prices show absolutely zero signs of slowing down lends me to believe that inflation has no stopping points in this country.
Yes, inflation is bad. There's no doubt about it, Paul. 8.6% inflation, and then you will hear people argue, well, that's not the right number. That includes energy and food. Well, guess what? Energy and food, the two things about those particular commodities is they're used by absolutely everyone. The other thing is, as I was looking, is the core inflation where you take away food and energy is still 6%. So that's very, very high. So there's some talk about the Fed may raise interest rates, and we were visiting just casually a little bit before the podcast. I'm not sure the Fed has enough ammunition or desire to do what would be necessary in the short term to bring inflation down. So even if they wanted to, I'm not sure they have the resources to do that. And then what's the end point? Well, we saw in 2007, 2008, when oil prices were up in the $140, $150 a barrel, and that hadn't really moved through the economy. That was more of just a flash. Well, we had the huge economic downturn. So that's the other thing, is a big time massive recession could do something to bring prices down. But the thing that, makes me shudder when I think of that is that, well, what happens if you have a huge recession but prices don't come down, so-called stagflation? You get the worst of both worlds. You get a lot of people out of work. You get the economy way slowed down, but prices keep coming up. So, yes, this is not an issue that's transitory. It's not one that's going to be easy to fix, and it's one that is being felt by everyone in the country. Some more than others. Most billionaires are probably doing okay, but even upper middle class families and that range certainly do know that prices are higher when they're filling up their cars or they're going to the grocery store.
Yeah, and we get from the Biden administration, well, this is Putin's price hike, and then they say it's price gouging on the part of the oil companies. It's pretty much they're throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping something sticks. But electorally speaking, this has got to be a real opportunity, because I don't think the situation is going to change, as you said, unless the Federal Reserve really cracks down. And even if they do, it'll take a while to wring all this excess money. There's talk about a 7.75% interest rate increase coming from the Fed. That may or may not happen. It's going to take some time for this money to be pulled out of the economy. In the meantime, that would be very recessionary and set up all kinds of other problems.
And, anytime you hear price gouging on energy, I hearken back to the windfall profits tax of the 70s and 80s. And the idea there is energy prices are high, so let's throw another tax on the energy companies. That'll encourage them to produce more somehow. So,
well, it reminds me more of the negative energy prices or oil prices of April of 2020, because if the oil companies had such absolute authority over energy prices,
what were they doing in that month?
They didn't have it then.
Yeah, that's good.
They took their eyes off the ball for 1 month and suddenly lost control of all those energy prices.
Yeah.
But we all know that that is not the way. And, you can complain about certain aspects of the oil and gas sector, but to call it a less than a free market, it's really hard to point out that it is less of a free market than a lot of other areas of the economy that are relatively free, and it's a pretty highly competitive energy sector out there all over the world, globally integrated. But speaking of price hikes, not Putin's price hike, Albuquerque's price hike, and it kind of molds into the previous issue that we discussed with the homeless. I talked to Channel 7 KOAT about increases on our water, trash, and power bills, most notably the recent price increase over the span of a year, $12 for your garbage pickup from the solid waste department. That's geared towards addressing the homeless encampments and whatnot. And, part of me says, sure, we need to spend more money on that. The other part of me says the city of Albuquerque just increased its budget by 20%, increasing spending beyond what Mayor Keller requested, denying Albuquerque residents a small tax reduction that Councilor Dan Lewis had pushed. And now you're going to come after us for an increase on our trash pickup because you can't deal with the homeless situation. So just another way they're nickel and diming us in the city of Albuquerque. So check out that Channel 7 story. I put it over at errorsofenchantment.com.
Yeah, and Paul, water and sewer are enterprise funds where they purportedly, set their rates based on their actual costs. But, in this case, as you point out, isn't it ironic that we're basically getting a homeless charge in our water and sewer in garbage pickup? Does that really seem right when, as you say, there's lots of other money that they could have thrown at that problem and taken care of it, not how they ended up doing that?
Yeah, and generally speaking, I do like the idea of enterprise funds, but the homeless situation in Albuquerque is a failure of enforcement.
Oh, exactly.
Not the, you can say whether that should be done with the trash, pickup and solid waste, because they do have to, unfortunately, take in mass quantities of waste from these encampments. But really, I think it's wrong to charge people who are already paying more. And of course, this is another regressive deal. If you're making good money, yeah, you'll notice the $1 or $2, a few bucks on your power, a few bucks on your water, but it's the low income, it's the needy fixed income folks that you're dealing with here. Really quickly, I missed this on the inflation discussion. I know this is a shock to you, but a new study came out that said that the people most impacted by high inflation are poor and rural folks. They actually did a study on that.
Paul, we need to bid on those studies.
I know. It's not rocket surgery to note that is.
Let's do a study whether if we give away gasoline for free, whether people will line up for blocks around to take us up. But yes,
we need a police presence there to make sure people don't riot.
Exactly. So yes, that is not a surprise. As we've talked a couple times already in this podcast, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, these unexpected or expected, doesn't matter. These increases in your prices, your costs have a big impact. And why rural as opposed to urban? I'd say a couple of things. Probably the wealth levels in rural America tend to be not as high as in urban, but maybe there's more impact than that.
Well, I think rural people just drive farther distances.
Okay, there you go.
That would be my assumption.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So either one would work. So those are.
So I'll read you a couple of lines from the study. If the cost of car fuel reaches $6 a gallon, drivers earning up to $40,000 per year will be spending 11% to 38% of their after-tax take-home pay. By comparison, those making $150,000 or more will pay 2.8 to 4.9% of their after-tax earnings, according to a study by car insurance app Jerry. I did not know there was a car insurance app named Jerry, but there is. Also, rural drivers would take a bigger hit than urban and suburban residents, paying 9.4% of their after-tax income at $6 a gallon compared to 6.3% for urban drivers, said the study. So and that's not even necessarily considering, maybe it is, but it's probably also more expensive to fill up at the tank when you're in a rural area with less competition.
Yeah, the bitter irony, Paul, is when I'll go to southeast New Mexico or the Farmington area where energy is produced, it comes out of the ground and it's 10, 20, 30 cents higher than it is in Albuquerque.
That is truly crazy, and I bet rural people out there in other parts of the state are just gnashing their teeth at all that, but that is a true fact.
Yeah, they know it, and they don't like it.
Yeah, all has to do with the pipelines. The forest fires around New Mexico. Biden was in town. He's the first sitting president to hit New Mexico, to come here since Obama, I believe, in 2006. He came in to say, yeah, we're going to give you all the money you need, basically. Not really anything newsworthy aside from him being here. But the folks at Searchlight New Mexico did a article on this, and I haven't put it up on the blog yet, but I plan to very shortly. And it really hits on the issues that we've talked about with the Forest Service. Known locally, this is a line about northern New Mexico. Known locally as La Floresta, the U.S. Forest Service is often seen as a feudal lord, a faraway government entity that has accumulated vast holdings with little idea of how to properly steward them or enough funds to do the job. Now, we have a solution for that one. It's called Get the Federal Government Out of Managing Forest Service and BLM lands and let the state of New Mexico do it. And that includes the mineral rights, which then could be used to fund a proper regime of forest management. But you talk about Don Quixote right there, and I'm not saying it could never happen, but reducing the federal footprint in New Mexico is a mammoth undertaking, and it's something that we've tried. Utah's sued, but it's really a tough push. This article, it's at New Mexico Political Report, it's from Searchlight, does a great job of highlighting that this is not just a conservative pipe dream, or management of National Forest Service land shouldn't be just a conservative, the reform shouldn't be just a conservative goal. It should be something that all New Mexicans care for and are concerned about. Of course, this is based on not just the management of the lands, but the fact that controlled burns created the largest forest fire in New Mexico history.
Yes, and Paul, this issue of frustration with the Forest Service in New Mexico is not a new one, and I'd call upon the 1974 John Nichols book, The Milagro Beanfield War, a classic piece of
Robert Redford, right?
Yeah, in the movie. The book's fantastic, but it really did go over the frustrations with northern New Mexicans and the Forest Service. So this is an issue that's been there for a while. And then, they point to northern New Mexico because, unfortunately, those are the people whose houses and the forests around them have been burnt down this most recent cycle of quote-unquote control burns. But there's been a lot of friction with regard to other resources in places like Catron County, New Mexico, down in the Gila and Silver City as well. So, there is a bit of friction in terms of, if the rules are made in Washington and you don't have feedback to what's going on the ground, like happens in New Mexico a lot of times, you're going to get some unpleasant results. And I would say that is absolutely what we have with the Forest Service right now.
Yeah, and they're always going to plead poverty because they don't have the interest in allocating the resources to manage those lands correctly. The state of New Mexico may not be perfect, but we have better incentives in place. Real quick, final two things. Saw a weird news item from State Senator, Democrat Sia Correa Hemphill. She's a Democrat from, I believe, Silver City area, Senator I was honored to receive, this is her Facebook post, I believe, I was honored to receive the New Mexico Environment Department's 2022 Champion in Protecting Public Health and Environment Award for supporting the governor's initiatives to protect and restore the environment and foster a healthy and prosperous New Mexico for present and future generations. Now, who is I'm not talking the cabinet secretary, I'm talking about who is the real head of the New Mexico Environment Department?
The governor of New Mexico.
Yeah. So you have the governor offering her political allies awards for supporting, literally, she says, the governor's initiatives to protect and restore blah, 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 blah.
You know, Paul, call me old-fashioned, and maybe the governor can like her, maybe she could say nice things, but when you give an awards, we supposedly have 3 co-equal branches of government.
Supposedly.
So, I don't know. That would be like the Supreme Court naming a courthouse after a legislator that passed a lot of money for their operations and new courthouses. Is it illegal? I don't know. It might be, but I don't think the look isn't very good.
Yeah, and there are questions right now as to whether the state of New Mexico has a education secretary.
I agree. Everything I've read, and the only answer I can get from media reports, Paul, is we don't know.
No, we don't know. And, New Mexico is at the bottom of educational outcomes. This is an important issue. Senator Candelaria tweeted something about this recently. But it's reported Secretary Steinhaus is giving up some of his day-to-day job duties, but then other reports, including those from Steinhaus himself, say that he is stepping down completely from the administration. The fact is that we just do not know what is going on at New Mexico's education department. We know that the department has gone through several secretaries already under this administration, and that there are serious challenges facing our state in education achievement and outcomes. But we'll just see. It's a very odd story, to say the least. All right, Wally, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube and Rumble channels. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.